Oh, I just need a minute. Where is our? Never mind. Got it. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. November 9th, 2021. So 2-point adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any additional items to add to the agenda? Yes, Councilor Phillips.
I do have one item. It's the Parkland Regional Library Executive Committee appointment.
And that would be under. Perfect. Thank you very much.
So would we put that under 7.4?
Perfect. Okay, so, oh, sorry.
I've got
Councilor Auld.
I would like to add just for closed session, just council discussion. Just general council discussion.
Okay, perfect. Any other additions to the agenda? Okay, so could I have a motion to adopt the agenda minutes?
I'll adopt or make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Yep. All in favor? Carried. 4.1, adoption of the previous minutes. Does anyone have any concerns about the council minutes from November 2nd, 2021? Could I have a motion, please? Ms. Carol, Councilor Fraser.
I'll move to accept the minutes of the November 2nd meeting as presented.
All right, all in favor? Carried. So 6.1, the Kickstart grant program. I'm bringing this up because of two reasons. I just like a little bit more information from previous council members. I know that we added about $150,000 to this fund on September 7th and on June 8th. It came from an accumulated surplus. And there was a financial report done on August 17th, but I couldn't find it attached to the minutes. And the program was extended to March 31st of 2022. So could I have just a little bit more information about that program?
I mean, this program was put in place to help nonprofit groups, people put on events inside the town of Rocky Mountain House. Because of COVID sidelining a lot of events and a lot of things, the Kickstart program was put in place to get these events going and moving and having things opened up again for the public to do now that we're kind of coming out of COVID. The reason why it was extended until the 31st of March is because with the restrictions that came back into place, some of the events that were going to go on were canceled, and we're not sure how these events are going to move on going forward. So it was extended just to allow those events that were going to happen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to add any information to that? Councillor Fraser.
Well, like, I guess one of the troubling parts with COVID is that a lot of the groups that put on events count on the previous year's event happening to fund the next year's event. And because there was that gap year, and because the surplus was from COVID funds from the province, we felt that the best way to use that COVID money was to help those nonprofits kind of kickstart their events again, because they didn't have the previous year's funds to draw on.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Boniface.
So with an event not going forward in say 2019, would they have not had their surplus from 2018 that they could have carried over to when the events start? Because if they didn't host an event, that means they had no expenses during that time.
Does anybody, Counselor Fraser?
A lot of them planned events and put out money for those events and booked entertainment for those events before everything shut down. And some of the groups had one event and they make money at another event. And so one event happened that wasn't their money-making event, and what they normally make up from happened later. It was basically just to acknowledge that a lot of these groups don't operate with a large surplus and they're not making a lot of money, and that getting these groups up and going and having events for the community was a good thing for the community. And so it was to help those along.
Mr. Kraus, I was wondering if you could tell me, or it could be for later on, our accumulated surplus, that's the one that starts at like 7 million and it was down to like at the end of 2022 was like 2.75 million. Is that the same surplus that we're pulling this from?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Actually, I'm probably have Ms. Quinlan speak on accumulated surplus and so forth, because Ms. Quinlan, you want to come up to the delegation? It is basically it's basically a reserve that's not assigned to any capital project or. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I don't have the statements in front of me, but we took it out of the accumulated surplus. We have on the statements, the surplus is all grouped together, but we do have sort of an operating surplus that just it's left in operating. And I think it was about $1.5 million. And we try to kind of maintain it at that. And then anything else that's surplus at year end then gets transferred into reserves, which are then sort of restricted surplus accounts. And I just wanted to highlight, as Councillor Fraser mentioned, last year we had a surplus. Sorry, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was in the 500,000 plus range. And we did receive it was called the MOST grant from the provincial government, and it was used to offset lost revenues. We recognized, I think, about $550,000 last year. So in essence, the surplus that we had during COVID was almost, you could say it was almost entirely attributed to us receiving that grant. Otherwise, we would have been like just about broke even. So it was thought that, you know, to use some of those funds to continue to support the community. Does that answer your question on the surplus?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
It's just that the surplus number, I was looking at that because, of course, in the last few days, we've had a number of issues that are going to come up for budget.
Right.
And I like to plan ahead.
Right.
So with the RCMP and that would come out of our emergency surplus if we didn't have budget money for it, right? Because if we had like an extra bill for $1 million for next year and that we didn't have in the budget, right? And it would come out of emergency surplus. That's the fund that you're talking about, right?
Oh,
Sorry, I can repeat all of that.
oh, no, that's
So,
okay.
so would you like me to repeat all of that?
I think there were enough microphones at the end.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, if we tend not to use the surplus a lot, but in an extreme situation, then we would make a motion, council would make a motion to use accumulated surplus funds, or a lot of times if there's an extra capital project or something, we'll take it out of the reserves. So
Okay.
there's and once we go through the budget documents, you'll see we've got a listing of all the different reserves.
Because on our quarterly statement that we got to prepare for this meeting,
Right.
those two numbers are not on there, right? Like what do you call it? The emergency surplus is the one that Councillor Fraser.
So accumulated surplus is when everything that's over and it's collected, and that's that big number, and then everything is moved into specific surpluses, because that's your asset depreciation savings.
Right.
So you can put it into the water and sewer surplus, or you can put it into the recreation. So it's not that it's been spent, it's that it's been allocated.
Right.
I
So
guess.
thank you very much for clarifying that. So out of our allocated money, we had 7.5 at the beginning of 2017 or whatever the number
Right.
is. And it changed to 2.75 at the end of 2020. And now it's like 1.5 because we've taken surplus money and we've allocated it into
The reserves.
everyday operations, right?
No. I'll go back and look at the financial statement. Sorry, just doing it sort of blind. And I'll look and see what it is you're talking about and I can clarify that for
Okay.
you.
Okay.
But typically we bring back a motion after the year end is done. I bring back a variance analysis and we also do show you what the operating surplus is based against the budget. And then we have a policy that directs how much money's to be moved into reserves. And we bring a motion for you to say, based on our policy, say if you had $1 million surplus, it will move into these reserves and then it's transferred into the reserves. We try to keep about 1.5 million in just the sort of the accumulated operating surplus. And that would be what we would use in the event that we had something really unusual happen and had to access funds that weren't in the operating budget.
Okay.
Typically, sorry, one more thing. Typically, we wouldn't balance an operating budget using transfers from surplus.
Okay.
You want to balance it just with current operating revenues,
Okay.
but you can access it.
Okay. Because my concern is that we've been notified with two fairly substantial budgetary items coming up that we're going to have to figure out. And I'm just wondering how that's going to, like, if we have to make, like, I'm wondering if we have to put that Kickstart money back into our reserves because of these big ticket items. That was my
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a few things. Yeah.
If I could speak to that, I think we're okay. I mean, I've been in contact with K Division and talked about the current salaries, and then I know the retro is coming, or I guess I shouldn't be talking about that.
Yeah.
But once we put the whole budget together, we'll come back with recommendations, and council can also direct us as to where you want us to, how you want us to handle that. But we'll come back with recommendations and say, based on all of the financial information, this is what we would suggest that you do.
Okay, perfect.
I don't think you have to put the money back.
Okay, well,
No.
I'm just getting lots of people asking lots of things about budgeting and stuff. Yes, Councillor Phillips.
Sorry, and just for clarification, the unrestricted reserves that we had didn't just disappear from 7.5 million down to the 2 million.
Correct.
They were actually moved into restricted reserves for water, rec, whatever. They were just put into proper restricted reserves. So the money never went anywhere. It just got moved from unrestricted to restricted. That's how that happened.
Correct.
And Mayor, actually, you'll see on the agenda that administration is asking for a financial task force meeting. And that's where we're actually going to go through all of these documents and explain it to council. So council has a good understanding of how the municipal finance is working and how we budget and so forth.
Okay.
And I think what is probably the most confusing thing for the public, especially, is we intermix the word surplus and reserves and where they're actually the same thing. So when we talk surplus, we're actually talking reserves. But through the financial task force, we're hoping that we can go through those documents and council would have a better understanding of our financial situation and reporting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So if there's nothing further, then we'll move on to agenda number 7.1 of new business.
Excuse me, Mayor, just because it's an agenda item, we do need a resolution. So it'd be just to accept the Kickstart discussion for information.
Councillor Boniface.
So at this time, just so that I'm clear on this, we're saying we're gonna vote on this Kickstart program, that we're gonna let it continue, or are we going to address this like talk about it at the financial task force meeting so that I have a greater understanding of how this is working?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna use that as information and pass a motion to say, thank you for the information, and we'll deal with it at the budgeting talks.
Thank you.
Okay, so may I have a motion to accept that for information?
Motion to accept it for information.
Thank you, Counselor Boniface. All in favor? And that's carried. So 7.1 RFD Financial Task Force meeting. Can I turn that over to Mr. Kraus,
Yeah,
please?
thank you, Mayor. So keeping on the same topic almost. Administration is asking council to establish a date and time for a financial task force meeting, and we are anticipating probably about 2 hours. And that's to go through 8 different documents, financial documents with council. So council was just to establish that.
Okay, Counselor Phillips.
I just see in the recommended alternatives, the date set is for November 23rd at 3 p.m. I will be out of town on November 23rd, and I'm just wondering if November 22nd is an alternative date for everyone.
Let me find my calendar.
Youth advisory on the 22nd at 4:30.
Okay.
Perhaps the 25th or 24th, sorry, which would be the Wednesday.
Does anybody have any conflicts on the 23rd? Sorry, on the 24th, it's a Wednesday.
I will make that one.
Counselor Hall.
That's fine.
Well, what time is it at? Counselor Fraser, can we move that youth meeting to a different time? Like I haven't even like, would that be possible? Or does it conflict with a bunch of other things? Because that's still 2 weeks away, right?
For me, I can move the youth council meeting. However, I'm not sure what the situation is with contacting all those kiddos.
How many members would be affected by that on the council?
It would just me and you.
I'm sorry, how many youth members would we have to get a hold of?
8, 7 or 8? 8. 8. Okay, it's 8 now.
Okay, I just think the council business,
It may be easier for me just not to attend this meeting rather than try and reschedule a youth council meeting.
Mayor, I think it'd be good for all of council to be here. I mean, we can schedule
Yeah.
the youth council meeting.
Yeah, we can
I mean-
reschedule it.
okay, so let's, Maren, can we just, that's fine with you,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll have Marina reschedule that and for what works so that we can have this. So does anybody else have a problem with November 23rd at 3 o'clock for the meeting? I'm sorry, the 22nd. I have 23rd written on my paper here. So it would be Monday, the 22nd at 3 o'clock. Does that work for everybody?
Mhm.
Okay, may I please have a motion? Counselor Phillips,
I'll make a motion that council establish a financial task force meeting for November 22nd at 3 p.m. in council chambers.
all in favor? And carried. So 7.2 RFD, September 30th, 2021, operating and capital financial statements. I'd like to hear from Mr. Cross again, please.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, council. So these are your first set of quarterly financial statements. I'll maybe try to give a little bit more background than I normally would and walk through them just so that try to give you a better understanding. There will be lots of firsts here. We typically present quarterly financial statements 3 times a year. So we present them in March, or for the periods ending March, June, and September. And the year end is December 31st. It takes quite a while to complete. The auditors usually present the last week of April. Statements have to be submitted to municipal affairs by May 1st. And then as they're wrapping up, we do a sort of more in-depth variance analysis and present usually the meeting after. We try to do it the meeting after, give you your variance analysis for the end of the year. So you do receive reporting 4 times a year. We split it into operating and capital so that you can sort of see how things are going. And it's a very high level review. I try to follow the format of the audited financial statements as much as possible. There's a few deviations, but that way you get used to looking at the same kind of format, the same classifications and grouping. So so we do a narrative, and then we also give you your financial statements. I'll just walk through the operating activities. This year we have a surplus of 841,000 at the close of September 30th. We do accrue some of the costs and the revenues. Just as an example, taxes, we received the bulk of the taxes by the end of August. So if we left all of the things that would create what we call timing differences, you'd have just big spikes in your expenditures. So you really wouldn't have any kind of idea what kind of surplus you're potentially generating. So for large items, we do try to accrue it just to smooth out the revenue stream and the expenditures if it's something large. So taxes are a good example of that. So at the end of the quarter, our revenues are sitting at 71% and 63%. And we also have a little COVID schedule at the bottom, and did it print off? Oh yeah, it's on the next page, sorry. We're trying to just show, because COVID's had such a huge impact on us in the last 20 months, just kind of trying to show you how the departments that have been really affected by COVID, how they're doing in terms of financial loss. We've been really fortunate over the last 2 years. I feel like our organization was extremely responsive. I mean, I'm sure you've heard on the news, towns and cities saying, oh, they've lost $3 million. We were able to, because of the dropped revenue, we were able to slow down our operations. In some situations, we did have to lay off people, or we redeployed people, but we were basically able to break even, which I think is a really success, because we weren't, and we didn't really know how long these closures were going to go for. So I really have to give all the staff a lot of recognition for being able to do that. They were very responsive. So I'll talk through that in a little bit. But we also do a variance report, and we do give you a narrative in the document. Trying to decide what the best way to do this is. I'm going to go to the financial statement, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it first, just to kind of increase your familiarity. So if you look at the financial statement, the statement of operations, under revenue, we group things by major classification, or by object is what we call it in municipal finance. So we show you what the net taxation is, sales from services and user fees, fines and penalties, permits, franchise fees, return on investments, rent and leases, contributions and sponsorships, grants, which is at all 3 levels, and then kind of a miscellaneous category. So these are the same groupings that you'll see on your audited financial statements. Then under expenditures, we report on a divisional basis. So I call these the major divisions within our operation. So there's legislative, admin, protective services, operations, utilities, social services, which is actually FCSS, cemetery, and if we have any kind of social housing programs, planning and development, and then recreation, parks and culture. And I do try to follow municipal affairs naming conventions so that everything stays really consistent. Culture consists of, for us, it's the library and the community center. But if we had a museum, it would fall in under that. So anything that's kind of, and they're all laid out in municipal affairs. So we break that down by division. Then we show you what your surplus of excess deficit of revenues over expenditures is. And then below I show adjustments. We also have what we call transfer to reserves. So we have three classifications of that. One is just our general reserve transfer, and we budget for that when we do the budget. So again, we're evenly distributing it throughout the year. Utility reserve transfers. Utilities are completely self-funding. So the revenues from utilities are required to pay for the operations as well as generate surplus that can go into the reserves, because technically you do not want to use tax dollars for utility capital projects or maintaining the utility infrastructure. It's something that municipalities have worked towards probably for the last 10 or 15 years. Some are just starting to sort of get there, but that's, why you might have seen probably 10 years ago increases in rates, because all of a sudden they had to become self-funding and they had to be able to generate enough money to support the capital requirements, which are, with construction these days, is substantial. And then we also have debt repayment. We include the interest for debentures in the expenditures, but debt repayment isn't an expense, but we budget for it in the operating budget. So we just show it as a line below. So that's how you get to your zero balanced budget. And that's how we show what our surplus or deficit is. We've also added one column this year. We've basically rebuilt the entire financial system in the last 2 years. And we've got a new budgeting software as well as our financial software. And now we finally got comparative figures. So we're starting to provide you with the prior year's actuals so that you can see a year-over-year comparison. So we're trying to give you information so that you can see trends, you can see how things are going. And as you see them, you'll start to develop a comfort level for it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
We also give you some,
I was just curious about the 2020 under the expenditures, the legislative.
I
I
knew
just-
somebody would ask that.
Well, it was that number,
Yeah.
and then as well as the recreation, parks and culture. Quite a difference down there as well.
Okay.
Just for
The
information.
legislative, actually, we have had a grouping thing. If you looked at last year's September statements, we had a line called general, which is our requisitions. And when these were prepared, we grouped that into legislative. It probably shouldn't have been grouped there. It should have been netted up against the taxes. So your legislative costs for 2020 year to date were $212,918. And yeah, I know, I looked at that and went, oops. So the general, it's just, we did change the presentation format. And as far as recreation, I would have to go look at that. I'm not sure why that's so high. The only thing I can think of is it could be to do with the library staff, because we pay them, but then they reimburse us. So the netting may not have happened with that, but I can follow up on that. So we also give you some graphs. I always like giving people visuals. Sometimes if you don't want to read all the numbers, if you look at the graphs, it kind of gives you an image and you can see either, you know, how things are doing or how things they're looking. So just one comment on municipal financial statements, and we're starting to, well, we were starting to see it till COVID landed, but municipal operations tend to be really stable. You have some seasonal discrepancies, you know, winter, snow clearing, that kind of stuff. But they tend to be really stable. And once you get your operation going well, I am amazed at, like, sometimes it's just, it doesn't change, but it's really good, because then if you do have a swing, you can usually find or see that there's something going on, but there's not a lot of fluctuation in the operations. So we have some graphs. The COVID update, if you look at that, what we've done is we've just pulled out the revenue and the expenditures. And unfortunately, recreation was the hardest hit in this last 2 years, but we're just showing you the budget for the year should have been a deficit of $1 million. As of 2021, we're sitting at a deficit of 619,000. So we're behind. Our deficit is smaller than it would normally have been, which is a good thing because we were shut down. So, and then I just did some monthly averages. Like if you look at monthly, we should be generating $117,000 deficit, but we're at 103. So we were able to respond to the loss in revenue. So if the deficit was over 117, then we'd be concerned.
Can I ask a question? My question is about sponsorship for like the Christensen Center, when we have those, like the subway room and the rotary room and all those rooms that, so when someone doesn't pay for that, it doesn't come off the budget, right? It stays in the budget and then it just doesn't get paid for. And then it shows as a loss on the following year once we figure out that we can't collect it. Is that how that works?
So if they, and we have sponsorships right from $500 all the way up.
Yeah.
So we would budget for it. If
Right.
someone did not pay it, it would just be reduced revenue. So the loss, if it created a loss, it would show up in your year-end surplus or deficit at the end of the year.
Okay. So like someone didn't pay their thing. I'm just wondering how it shows on this. Would it show on the
just wouldn't
COVID
show-
or?
It would show up as less revenue.
Okay.
So,
So that would be our variance would change.
yeah,
then,
so our
right?
budget for contributions and sponsorships was 155,000.
Mhm.
We're only showing 60,000.
So does that mean that out of that number that like half the people didn't pay those sponsorships, or it's just a bunch of other things in there?
I'd have to look and see what that consists of. I don't know the details on that,
Okay.
but right now that means we've only gotten 60,000.
Out of what we.
155.
Yeah, so like your, I call it accounts receivable, or your accounts receivable would be 155, or your budget for accounts receivable, right? Or
Yeah.
payments or whatever.
Yeah.
Sales, and then we're only at 60. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to know where that came in at. Counselor Boniface.
So on that topic then that you're just discussing about, like the rooms there with names, and if you find out that people have not paid, do we take their name off the door? Do we send them to collections? Like how do we do this? Because money's money.
Yeah, Mayor, and I think council, just to be aware, during 2021, we've also provided a discount to our sponsors because of COVID. I think that was 25%.
That was 30%, right? That was in this, or I saw that somewhere.
35%, sorry. So I mean, that would, the budget wasn't adjusted for that because the budget was passed. So that would show as reduced revenue there. Yes, and to answer Councillor Bonifaz's question, yeah, if a sponsorship isn't paid, the name goes away. It's taken up.
Perfect. My other question is about garbage. So for like some of the things that we talked about that we're made aware of, you know how you said that the utility transfers to reserves, that is self-sustaining, right? It pays for itself. And so if it's like, where are we at with the eco center?
If they go into a deficit, then technically, well, collectively, the three, water, sewer and garbage, we would probably look at them as a whole, but technically, if one of them went into a deficit, then we would want to draw out of the reserve to fund that, because you don't want to use tax dollars. So I did print off more details and I didn't bring them, so my apologies. But right now, both the eco center and the waste transfer, when we originally budgeted them, and we can provide you with more information on this, but so this is just more high level. But when we budgeted them, at the time, so this would have been November last year, we're anticipating a partnership. The county was going to be contributing and we were going to have commercial garbage. So one of the issues that's happened is because it's been reduced operationally, we are in a deficit and it's sitting at about 200,000 right now for both of those collectively. The solid waste, and you would tend to look, it's kind of an arbitrary, like this year, because it's new, we took the residential waste fee, which is about $28, and we arbitrarily kind of allocated funds to residential pickup, waste transfer station and the eco station. But collectively, you want to look at those three cost centers all together, and as long as those three come out okay, then, because you're really just saying, okay, well, we're going to put $2 here or $3 a month here. So, but we are sitting in a deficit. So it is a discussion that we'll have to have with council and make decisions as to what do we want to do for next year? How are we going to solve this?
And so I have another question. The green bins are included with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's perfect. My other question is that on the eco center, we still have a distribution of assets and some like formalities we have to resolve with the county of Clearwater yet. Does that come out of out of that, or would it come out of capital asset kind of area?
So we've finalized the agreement, but there's one final meeting, I think of the ICC that has to happen, and then the asset distribution will occur. Basically, we will not be paying anything. We'll be getting funds from the asset distribution.
Okay.
So it's just, it just didn't happen in the summer and then an election occurred. So, yeah.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, fabulous.
So I'm gonna just walk through, and I'm gonna walk through, I know I'm taking more time than I would normally take, but I'm gonna walk through them specifically, just so that trying to familiarize you with things. So our taxes on the variance analysis for September, our taxes have been accrued at 75%. Sale of service and user fees, COVID has impacted this area, obviously. Recreation, everything's running at about 30%, and solid waste revenue is below budget, as I mentioned. Fines and penalties, they're a little on the low side right now. So tax penalties are sitting at 34%. And we apply tax penalties in January, August, and October. So we'll be applying them again in October, and that hopefully will bring them up. If they're low, I would actually say that's a good thing, because
paid
that
on time.
means, and we've really worked hard in the last 2 years to get people compliant, get them onto monthly payment plans, and work with people if they just need a little extra attention. Permits and licenses, so it's high, and we do bill animal and business licenses at the start of the year. So we haven't accrued that over the period, but it's not huge dollars. I think it's about 20,000 for animal licenses. And so we just kind of let that draw down. Franchise fees are a little bit, I mean, they're only 3% down. But again, franchise fees are based on consumption. So possibly October, November, December, we'll start to see them pick up, but they usually come in right on track. Our return on investments is above budget. We did cut this budget substantially last year because basically interest rates dropped to like, I don't even think we're getting 1%. Interest is transferred through to the reserves. We do not depend on the interest for operating, because if your interest rates go down, it's a big scramble to try to find a couple $100,000. So if interest rates drop, you might see your reserve transfer drop, but we make sure that all flows through. We've done better this year because we've really tried to, we have what we call, it's called a mush account with the bank, and we get a little better interest rate. It's better interest rates than term deposits, and it's completely flexible. We can draw money in and out of it. So we've tried really hard to put as much money as we can in there, and the interest rates, I don't know if they've gone up much, but we've put more in. So we're actually making more money on our investments, which again is a good thing. General rentals and leases, again, that's down. That's a lot of them are rental or recreation related. So they're low. Contributions and sponsorships, same thing. And then grants, federal, provincial, and local. It's a little bit low. We accrued, we had $100,000 left of the most grants. So it's been put into here because our operations were shut down. And then the rest is more just timing of receipts. We get, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but we get different grants. And that's also local. That's the monies that we get from the local would be Clearwater County. Under the expenditures on the next page. So if you look at legislative, it's low. Again, the last 2 years, it has been low because there's very little travel. There's no meetings, there's no conferences. So everything, that whole area is dropped. Administration is basically sitting right on target. Protective services, the RCMP and fire agreements have been accrued. The county does notify us once a year, like at budget time, of what our contribution is. The RCMP, we receive quarterly billings, and sometimes they're a little slow in coming, like we don't get them like right at the quarter end. So if we have to, we just kind of accrue based on what we've been receiving. And it's down also because there was one vacancy for CPOs, and it's now filled. Operations and infrastructure, it's on target. It's a little bit low, but then again, in the winter, you have a little pickup of activity, especially if we have a heavy snowfall. Utilities, it's low. It's funny, COVID has impacted the entire organization, and I'm not sure why, but it has. It's just slowed everything down. So it's a little low. Water sitting at 70%. Wastewater's at 52, and solid waste is at 66. And the contracted services, which is your biggest expenditure, they're under budget in all three areas. In the waste, that's because we anticipated having the county involved with us. Social services is low, but again, the FCSS grants, we've accrued them. They usually award the majority of their grants in January. Planning and development, it's basically on target. Recreation, we've talked a lot about that, but Rec Admin and Christensen are at 69%. The pool is at 52%, and guest services and fitness at 41%. We've seen a big uptake in activity once they opened, but it's been hard for them all year. And then again, your transfers that I talked about. So that's kind of a synopsis of where we're standing with the operating. We also give you a capital statement, and I'll go through this quicker, but I like to give you a financial statement for capital if you look at the next page and group things, just so that you kind of get a snapshot. We'll show you the carry forward budgets, the current budget, and then the combined. So last year we had carry forwards of $4 million worth of projects. There's 10 million for 2021, the most significant part being the waste treatment plant. Like, this is very high for a typical year. So we've got a budget of 14 million. And then the next couple of pages, and I'm not going to go through these, but we give you a list of all the projects that are approved. Right now, these probably won't make, well, they might make some sense, but once you've gone through the budget process, then you'll see the whole cycle, because you will have reviewed and approved these projects. You'll have had discussion on them, and then we report to you on a quarterly basis on the status. Again, the capital tends to be really slow in coming because a lot of the construction work is done in the summer, and then the invoicing often doesn't come in till October, November. Is there any questions on these? No? Okay. So yeah, it's when I look at it, it all looks fine. There's not really anything that's unusual. I think we carried forward more monies than we needed, but just, I didn't want to, usually what we do, and we'll clean this up. If a project has surplus funds, once it's completed, those funds go back into the reserves. This year, I carried a few more of them forward because we just weren't sure if they were completely done, but we'll spend more time with the directors and say, okay, that's it, you're done, goes back in. And if they can't just take money and reassign it, it has to come through you guys. Okay. So that's your financial statements. Questions? Okay. And then there's one more piece. This is, and sorry, I know this is taking a long time. But I just thought this was really important. You also received the, I'm not sure what they're calling it. It's the
Financial indicators.
yeah, it's something new that Alberta Municipal Affairs came out with. It's called the Indicator Dashboard, and they went back a few years, so it's been produced from 2016 forward, but they just released these 2020 ones. And I also included the document. I'm not going to go through it, but it explains what each indicator means and what you want to have. This, I think, is really important because we did have a few red check marks back in 16 and 17. We are now completely green, which is good. And basically, these are like really wide guidelines that you want to know that your municipality is following. If something starts to lean towards a red, that means there's some adjustment that you need to do with your operation in order to get back.
And those are set down. Sorry. And those are set down by like municipal affairs or Alberta government, those indicators, like that chart.
Yeah, that's correct. Municipal Affairs has developed this. A lot of these are really standard. I would call them standard financial indicators that any business would look at. But just, you know, your audit's good. You haven't had a ministerial review. That's really good. Your tax base, that's just showing you what's your residential tax base. You wanted 70, 80%, you know, over 60, that's good. Your collection rate of collecting taxes, you don't want to go below 90%. If you do, then there's a problem, right? So that's good. The only one that I think is it's showing a -8% population change. What that tells me is that if your population's going down, your economy's contracting in town. So that's going to make it more difficult for us. So that's something you want to watch. Your current ratio is current assets to liabilities. That means we've got enough money. If we shut the doors today, we could pay all of our outstanding debt. Your accumulated surplus, that's a combination of all the things you were probably looking at in the financial statement. So it's a good, healthy number. Our financial reporting is submitted on time. Our debt to revenue ratio is 30%. That's good. Debt servicing is good. Your investment in infrastructure, that's an important number. We have spent our amortization is about 3.3 million a year. You need to replace at least that much every year. Otherwise, your infrastructure's aging faster than you're replacing it. Our age is 60%, and this one was an NA, but that's when you have an election. They want to see more people running than you have seats. So it's just, I think it's a really important one to watch. And I think it's good that we're in a solid position. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if no one else has any questions, I'm looking for a motion. Councilor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to accept the September 30th operating and capital financial statements as information.
All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. 7.3 Recreation Master Plan Update.
Good evening, council. Yeah, so today I'm here to present, I guess, a bit of an executive summary of what we've been up to with regard to the recreation master plan. In June of this year, the Recreation Board began the process of reviewing the recreation master plan, which was done in 2017. We held a half-day retreat in mid-June with the rec board. At that time, we reviewed various sections of the plan, review the planning framework, discussion on current trends, needs assessment review, review the recommendations, and that's where we tended to focus most of the recommendations that came out of the 2017 Recreation Master Plan. The success opportunities, these were all things that were identified in the 2017 plan. So it was determined at that time that we would prepare and distribute a survey via the town and county websites, social media platforms. We took the survey to the streets at the Market on Main as well. We were able to involve the Youth Advisory Committee in hoping to engage the youth in this survey as well. So in your report, I provided attachments that were, the 2017 Recreation Master Plan, the Recreation Survey, including the appendix. This is what we presented to the public. I provide you with the survey data, all the raw data, including the 200 and some comments that were received. And then what I hope to do tonight is just do a bit of an executive summary and walk you through the survey results that were in the document in your package has like 4 slides per page. So I'll walk you quickly through this. And if you have any particular questions, I know we've reviewed this at the Recreation Board. And so they've had a chance to look at this. So we'll, yep. So, okay. So part of the goal of the survey is reviewing, what's happened in the last 4 years, and setting perhaps, priorities for the upcoming, there we go. 5, the plan was originally a 10-year plan, 2017 to 2027. We're almost halfway through that 10-year time. So having a look and see where are we at. We've made some significant facility upgrades and updates since 2017. And so the next couple of slides will just highlight some of those. Obviously, the North Saskatchewan River Park, covered bleachers, that whole project, again, completed in partnership with the RASA, the Chuck Wagon Association, the Lions Club, the town, and Clearwater County, as well as funding from the provincial government through the CFEP grant. Big one that opened and soft launch in 2020, opened for the first full year here in 2021, was the spray park. And again, the spray park committee did the lion's share of the work and fundraising, also funding from the town, the county, and sponsorships. The Helen Hunley Park, this was completed in partnership with the Helen Hunley Foundation. Again, that was completed in 2019. Trail development and added amenities. This is an ongoing, and you can see that, 2018, there's, trail development along 50th Street and 53rd Avenue. The wayfinding signage project was done in partnership with the primary care network in 2019. You can see also listed the various trail segments that can be completed this year. The section along Highway 11 from ATB all the way down to the co-op, the Highway 752 from 50th Avenue. And eventually, once that underground utilities get completed later this year, that whole trail will be completed. And then the new trail along the 51st or 54th Street extension to Creekside. So that's ongoing, and significant improvements there. Upgrades to the indoor pool. 2017, we renovated the upstairs programming room, which used to be the Craft Guild room. Now it's a program room. The Craft Guild is now located in the Christensen Center in lease space there. Construction on the pool deck in 2018. The combined heat and power units and boilers were done in 2020. In 2021, new sand filters for the leisure pool and hot tubs, as well as the sound baffles. 2020 saw some significant upgrades to the arenas with the new ice plant and the purchase of a new ice resurfacer. And then we also did some improvements to the bleacher seating at the Quick Lane Arena. So just, the survey itself ran from July 15th to August 23rd, composed of nine questions, including 3 which are demographic questions. 70% of the town were town residents, 26% Clearwater County residents. Total of 418 responses. Laura, can I get you just to lift that microphone up just a shade? Thank you. So out of those, 334 were web responses, 84 paper responses, 100% completion rate for those that started the survey, and also 217 comments were received. And then one of the questions, how important was recreation to you? The average was 80% saying it's important, right? So just a couple of slides on the demographics. Here you can see the 26 to 60 age demographics were the primary people that responded to the survey. Indoor facility priorities. The questions that were asked in the survey related to the priorities that were identified in 2017. So when we put these out there, these were all priorities in 2017. So we asked, are they still priorities? And this is sort of the response we had. So I've got individual slides for each of these. Upgrades to the indoor pool. We've done upgrades, but some of the, we've just completed, I just got a draft of the scoping audit on the HVAC system and our systems, which will hopefully provide some direction as far as upgrades to the whole HVAC system and its aging. It's original to the building and those types of things. Many of the comments in the survey spoke to the improved ventilation on deck, improving the extreme temperature changes, those types of comments. Again, upgrades to the indoor pool were different because we've already accomplished a lot of things at the pool, but the main focus on the comments, okay, we need to do something with humidity, and hopefully we can address that with upgrades to the HVAC system. The indoor adventure park was identified in 2017, still shows up as, I think, the general comments. We didn't list them all. We sort of try to group some of those, is that community is looking for more indoor winter activities other than hockey, curling, again, some of these things, because of the limited access to the gyms with the schools being closed in COVID, some of the, this and then the indoor gymnasium space, those I think were reflective of the lack of access that community has had in the last year and a half to to the gymnasium spaces. But this was identified in 2017, gym space, indoor soccer facility, field house, those things were identified. And again, it still shows up from a community side of things as something that, you know, the community sees a need for. We do have a joint use agreement with the schools. It's due for renewal. We try to review that on a regular basis. So that's one of the agreements that is up for review. Indoor climbing wall was identified in 2017, still has an interest in there. The search and rescue has expressed an interest in this because they would use it as a training facility, and they might be able to partner if we were to choose to go on with something like this. And finding a location within our existing facility is something we would have to look at. Concert hall, performance theater, it was identified in 2017. Really, we didn't get any comments on it. We've done some improvements at the Lou Soppet Center with sound and stage curtains and those types of things in the last year. But it still came up as something identified. An Ag Rec Center was identified in 2017. The comments here were exact wording that came out of the recommendations. It's one thing of note is there are a couple of privately owned arenas located throughout the county. So whether that's something that we need to focus on as a town or not, or partnership. Seniors facility, again, this was identified in 2017. 10% of the survey respondents were aged between 64 and 75. And most recently, FCS undertook a couple of the seniors' social needs assessment and the social master plan were complete in 2020. So we're looking at that document as something to guide us or lead us in that direction. Gymnastics facility, and this was identified in 2017. Private businesses have offered the training center for gymnastics in the community. In a special event space, this was identified in 2017. Again, no comments came out of the survey related to this. Outdoor facility priorities. We'll walk through each of these. Trail development still #1 priority, and even though we continue to do that, it's ongoing planning, and we've again identified some of the most recent trail improvements. Trail lighting is something that was identified in the recreation master plan, and I think that's still something because of the number of people that utilize our trails. Lighting is something that's communities identified as they'd like to see that. So outdoor washrooms, this was identified in 2017. The majority of the comments I think reflected around the need for washrooms at the spray park. You know, the building that we have there, it houses our mechanical systems. It was designed to potentially add washrooms in the future, but so it's just, again, it's been identified as a priority. Pump track, again, this was #4, identified this year. It was previously identified in 2017, but again, just to note that we have the Rocky Pump Track group that's formed, spearheading their planning to help initiate raising funds. I believe the Kinets have partnered with this group to sort of get the ball rolling and helping them move their goal of forming their own society so they can apply for possible grants. Change room facility, again, this was identified in 2017. Still identified, a wish to provide change rooms or washrooms. Some of that, it may be a combination between the washrooms at the spray park. Mountain bike train park, skills park, this was identified in 2017. There is a potential, the pump track group is looking at, if they plan a pump track, is there a way of also incorporating a skills park, maybe as a phased approach? We can do a pump track 1 year, skills park, depending on the location where you might be able to do that, something like that. But it is still identified by the community as something they'd like to see. The Crimson Lake Trail was identified in 2017. Again, was identifying, we'd have to have land acquisition. This is probably more of a county or regional type of initiative. Trail amenities, this is ongoing. This comes from our memorial benches, tree programs, installation. We've had a couple of grants for garbage containers this last year. I think they had a grant and they started changing over many of the garbage receptacles to bear-proof garbage receptacles. Enhancements to the skate park. Again, this was identified in 2017. The park was built in 2000, starting to show its life. But again, there was a group that held a skateboarding competition or event here in August, very successful. Larger dog park was identified in 2017, still listed as a wish or a priority for the community. Outdoor programming space, amphitheater. I think no comments on this, but we have accomplished a little bit of that with the Helen Hunley Park, and that gazebo gets used for those types of gatherings. New playgrounds. We're always inspecting our playgrounds, doing maintenance to meet the CSA requirements. It can be noted that Rocky Mountain has one of the highest playground counts for a small community in the province, well above the provincial guidelines or the, for the number of playgrounds per population base. Food services, the museum or visitor information center. This was something identified in 2017. Really no other comments came out of that, but it can be noted that with the advent of the spray park, food trucks or those types of things, working with our planning and development, with permitting and those types of things is a way of maybe addressing those types of food service opportunities. Programming priorities. It's interesting to note their youth engagement is still the #1 priority when it comes to the community, when it comes to programming. And it was noted that in 2020, council established the Youth Advisory Council. Sports facility maintenance, just ongoing. We communicate regularly with our user groups, recreation and public works departments that do the maintenance of our facilities. We're looking seriously at the ball diamond facilities in particular, and the comments that we get going back to when they were first built. Dew worms are an issue. If you have an issue, if you can figure out how to get rid of dew worms, that but then ongoing repairs to the backstops and those types of things. So sports tourism plan, okay, that was identified in 2017. Obviously, with the hosting of the Masters Games in 2019, we've developed a sport venue information notebook. We're going up to the provincial sport organizations headquarters there at the Percy Page Center in Edmonton, trying to get the word out there that we're open for business. Obviously, COVID has put a big hit on that. This last year, we did host a 1-week Alberta wrestling camp here. Very successful. 100 athletes came and spent the week here in Rocky Mountain House. They slept on the floor at the Lou Soppet Center and had their mats set up at the Christensen Center. So again, and they're planning to come back. They really enjoyed their experience. So again, spontaneous activity identified still as a need. And again, with COVID being shut down, some of these opportunities for us to utilize our dry floor space in the off season. Playground redevelopment plan. Again, it's just ongoing, reviewing, inspecting, and maintaining our playgrounds to meet the CSA standards. Community development for programming. Again, identified. We do have the town community grant program, and that's a program that council receives those grant applications, and that's a program of council. And again, we work with different community groups, helping them with grant applications and those types of things as well. More arts programming identified as a priority in 2017. We work with the Craft Guild, looking for any way we can help them and support them. We don't do a lot of our own arts programming, but we're certainly working with other groups. The Clearwater the social master plan indicated, creating gathering spaces would assist with those types of things. So. Seniors programming ongoing in 2021, just this last year, we implemented free recreation passes for seniors over 75. That goes a long ways to keeping our seniors healthy, and FCSS does their seniors week, rural intergenerational programming, and in their seniors social needs assessment identified there's lots of seniors programs. It said, I don't know if the seniors are aware that they're all out there. So part of it is a communication and getting that word out there. And the Rocky Arts and Craft Guild, we've mentioned that we endeavor to partner with that community group. Volunteer Center was identified as a priority, and we've actually accomplished that by creating a position within FCSS as a volunteer program coordinator, volunteer coordinator. They have the Volunteer Center, and they do an amazing job of matching people up for community groups that need volunteers. They contact and we can try to match them up. And just a note, the FCSS has now moved it into the post house building, and that's been a very positive move. Redevelopment plan of North Saskatchewan River Park. Now that was developed in 2017. I think a lot of the improvements that have already gone on at the North Saskatchewan River Park we identified previously. We're still working on certain aspects of improvements to the infield buildings, site development planning, and recently completed in 2021 is the new highway access off Highway 11A. So those are all things that will help improve the North Saskatchewan River Park. Communications identified as a priority in 2017, and we hired Miss Buttons here in 2018. So that's accomplished. A good part of the improving communications. Rental awareness, we have an up-to-date event rental package, and that's been developed and is available on our town website, and promoting the use of our facilities on all of our rental spaces. And then some additional priorities that were identified. Some of these were included in the survey identified by the Recreation Board. And so we put them in there to see if they were priorities of the community or not. And then we asked in the comments, there's some additional ones that showed up, the indoor walking track, indoor squash, outdoor disc golf. So one of the additional ones was programming or providing for a winter festival in February, something other than Family Day. So that was something that was identified in the survey. Outdoor beach volleyball, this was identified again because of the lack of gym access, is their way of developing outdoor volleyball opportunities. The outdoor facility co-op credit union field, or actually should be the Curtis Field lighting. Just notice that now, but the Rocky Mountain District Minor Football applied for a CFEP grant. They were unsuccessful in their first two opportunities. Just an update for council that they did happen to get, they got word in August that they were unsuccessful, and the deadline for submission was September. And Mr. Lott, went and made some proper calls, and he actually was allowed to submit late. So they did get a new application in here in October. So we'll see if third time's a charm.
Why they're
My understanding was that, from what Mr. Lott shared with us, is that the application was good. It was just a matter of the number of applications that were received. And so they were unsuccessful at that time. But in his communication with them, they said it was a good application and just encourage them to submit again. So sorry.
No, go ahead.
I understand there may be a letter coming to council asking for a letter to go directly to our MLA to support their application, as opposed to just as part of we have a letter support for the project, but that's just what Mr. Lott said. So you might see that coming as a way of maybe sticking a little bit of extra push into the.
How much was the difference? Like, is it a significant amount of money that we need to have from the grant? Is it not possible to like budget for that? You know,
Well, the
make that-
grant was for 120, was for the small grant was 125,000.
mhm,
The football club through legacy funding they got from the Masters games was their
Mhm.
contribution. And then the town and county contributions were, I think, budgeted for 62.5 was each to make up the total. So the amount that the grant application was for is for 125. So that, you know, again, at that time, it was, if we didn't get the grant, the project may not go through at this point, but that was part of, I think, in the budget discussion. So does that answer your question?
yes, it did. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Programming of the Canal to Play space or play center. Again, it was set up originally as a child minding space, but again, not utilized for that. It does get used on a drop-in basis, but you'll often look for, is there other ways of utilizing that space? The indoor facility, adding change rooms at the Christensen Center. This was identified as a need, but unfortunately, we're confined to the space that we have. There's not a whole lot of, without short of blowing out walls or adding on to the building, but it was still identified as a, excuse me, as a need. And again, this was identified, you know, when we added the junior hockey team, just added to the fact that the spaces of the old dressing rooms, you know, those not big enough for the young lads or the young men that utilize those spaces. The players.
guys are big guys.
They are, yeah, for sure. The outdoor boat launch was identified in 2017. Water access safety is, you know, it's currently by the water treatment plant, but it was still identified because it was listed as a priority, something to look at. And I think that, in a nutshell, is the results of the survey. You know, I have recommendations for council to accept this report as presented and add it to the 2021, add the results as Appendix G. So it would become part of the 2017, just as an added appendix. So the 2017 rec master plan is still a very valid document. This would just be added to that as part of that original document. So it's a snapshot in time. It's not in any way an in-depth survey that you might get if you hired consultants and pay them $50,000 to do what they did in 2017. It's just an in-house look at, you know, what's still relevant, letting the community know what we've accomplished, because we've accomplished quite a bit from what was identified. So.
Is it possible to build a second side on the far side of, what's the far arena called? Yeah.
On the north side of that,
Yeah.
anything's possible.
Yeah. But there is, it's like physically, is it our land?
Oh, yeah.
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 How far does it go into that parking lot of the high school?
Well, the town property, I believe, goes all the way to the roadway.
Okay,
So on
perfect.
the other side of the outdoor rink, right to the street, there is town property.
Because I believe they had a number of questions about storage, like the Rams. Storage, their guys are really not enough space for a team.
We've solved some of their storage issues with the use of the old ice plant room. And so we've enlarged that area, divided into a couple of storage units. We're currently renting out part of that to the junior B team for storage. And you'll see coming to you at capital budget time some suggestions for how we can make some minor changes to address referee, you know, challenges, you know, for dressing space and those types of things. But
Does anybody else have any questions?
Mayor, if I can just make a comment on that. I mean, so council's been presented with, the amended or rec master plan. There's a multitude of projects on that plan. I think what would be a good exercise, even if the recreation board is put those plans or ideas through a matrix. So like you'll see in your service level document that we'll get to you when we go to the service level review, all the services go through a type of priority or attribute kind of rating. Is it legislated, how much population benefit from this service and so forth. I think, with these projects, it'd be good to at least put it through a matrix. What's the capital cost? What would be the ongoing operating costs? And how many citizens it benefits or percentage of anticipated? I mean, we'd never know for sure, but anticipated. And I think you'd find through that process, there's probably some projects in there that's, benefits a lot of people, but cost low. So that might be the ones you take off quickly and then have to do some long-term planning for the higher capital ones that, benefit probably less population and so forth.
And when is that done?
I'm asking council to make a resolution to make us do it is actually what I'm trying to do. Your
Sorry,
worship.
I was waiting
So-
for you to tell me that it's done at the recreation department level.
Mayor, I think it'd be a good exercise for the rec board, to handle, to put a task to them on that. Because then you would get the input from the county and you would get the input from public and then plus our own recreation staff.
So would it be a separate committee or we would just ask the recreation committee to do a matrix?
Yeah, of the project. Do you, Mr., does that sound feasible?
Yeah, I think
Mr.
that's
Hammond?
reasonable. I mean, you can pass that on to the recreation board. We use that. The majority of the work is going to be done through my department anyways, but I think in consultation with the rec board, I think they're always looking for how can we be involved? They were involved in establishing this and getting it out there. So now it's a good way of keeping them engaged and moving this forward, is evaluating the projects that were identified in here. And just like Mr. Crow said, putting a matrix to it was the cost benefit to our community.
Councillor Fraser?
Can I also suggest that it goes on the agenda at the youth advisory once it's finished? I think that would be a wonderful exercise for them to see how the decision-making process for large capital projects and capital planning. Because I think that matrix is something that citizens don't see a lot. So I think that might help explain the how and why of things.
Well, I think let's do one thing at a time. So first things first, I think I love the recommendation. So could I have someone make the motion that we ask the rec committee to do a matrix?
I was just going to comment, do we need to, it says here, recommend the council accept the survey results as presented, added to G, Appendix G, to the 2017 Recreation Master Plan first.
Yeah, Mayor, there would be two
That's two.
resolutions and that would be the logical order. Yeah.
Okay. So the one being that a motion, or that be it resolved that council accept this report as presented and add the 2021 recreation survey results as Appendix G to the 2017 Recreation Master Plan. All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
All in favor? Carried. Councillor Hutchinson, do you want to make the second motion?
That the rec board
Committee.
complete a matrix study on the what? Help me.
Mr. Kraus, this is all you.
Yeah, Mayor, so it'd be somewhere down the line that council request the recreation board conduct a matrix of the revised recreation master plan projects that include capital costs, operating costs, benefiting citizens and any other item that they think is appropriate. There's probably more there because, I mean, with these recreation projects, some of these are not town-owned lands, you know, so that might be part of it. You know, like the boat launch is actually outside town boundaries, you know, and that gets involving Alberta Environment and Transport Canada and so forth, because you're going into a national waterway and so forth. So,
And is it not also 15 feet away from our drinking water intake for the town Rocky Mountain House?
Mary, a little more than 15 feet, but it's right there. It's the large yellow structure that's sitting in the river. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what he said.
Hmm.
Can I do that, or do I have to try and figure out? Do you want that read back? Is everybody?
I'm sure Tracy's got it.
Do we need that motion repeated so we can vote on it?
Mayor, that's up to council if they're comfortable with.
Okay, so the motion is to send the recreation survey updated plan to a matrix with the committee to enter it through the matrix. Is that
Just do the matrix review.
okay? So that's what we're voting on. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. 8.1 AMA. I beg your pardon. So I'm so sorry. It's way over here. So 7.4, the Parkland Library.
Can I make my motion?
Yes.
Sorry. Am I able to move that the recreation master plan final report go be sent to the Youth Advisory Council along with the results of the matrix activity from the rec board?
I would like to have some discussion on that because I think that we're still up in the air about the benefit cost analysis for that. And we were going to discuss that after I attended the first meeting. I think that's what we discussed last time, is that we were going to wait. So I'm just wondering if we could hold that motion until later.
I guess it would, but I would like things on the agenda at the meeting. I guess I'd like to have the final report presented because they were part of that. And then when that comes, that'll be at a future meeting. But I'm just moving to put the final report to the next meeting. And we haven't rescheduled that. So it would just be to put something on the agenda at that meeting.
So you're just looking at the final report done by the rec board is being added to the Youth Advisory Council meeting, which is in 2 weeks or whenever it is, correct?
Yes, so they would basically just get the same documents that we had. They would just go out into their packages and I'd probably do the presentation. It probably wouldn't be with Mr. Ament. Just to save time.
I don't have a problem with that. Is the agenda not already set for this meeting?
I don't set the agenda. I think this is something that should be added. That will come out the week before. I'm not the chair of that. So.
Okay.
Mayor, we haven't prepared the agenda for the next youth council meeting yet. So.
Okay, so can we, discuss it? Who sets that? Just Mr. Kraus, do you set that agenda?
Yeah, Mayor. So quite often it's either items that council has delegated down to the Youth Advisory Council, or the Youth Advisory Council puts agenda items on for their own that they wish to discuss.
Okay. So do we need a motion for that, or does it just get put into administration?
Mayor, so if if council wants something to go to the Youth Advisory Council, it's through resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Okay, so would we like to vote on the motion, please? All in favor? Carried. $7.4.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm on the Rocky Library Board and also the Parkland Regional Library Board. And as a result of the last Parkland Regional Library Board meeting, I have been appointed onto the Parkland Regional Library Executive Committee. And I just need to have that brought back to council so that there's a council resolution that I can be on that committee.
I
Make a motion.
make a motion to accept Len to be on the Parkland Library Board Committee, Executive Committee.
All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Correspondence for action, 8.1 AUMA resolution book.
Mayor, so council will be going to AUMA conference next week. Part of that conference is voting on these resolutions for determining if AUMA will be taking forward these items to the provincial government or lobbying the provincial government. So we always bring it to council to review prior to going to the AUMA conference. I can go through them with one by one with council if council so wishes quickly, or council has any questions about specific ones. How would you like me to proceed?
Does anybody have any questions about any of the resolutions for the AUMA? Can we just pass that as one motion to accept all the resolutions that we're going to vote on?
Yes. Yeah,
Would we like discussion on that?
Sorry,
Councillor Phillips?
just a little bit of additional information. All of these resolutions at AUMA will be presented individually at the AUMA convention with the background as to why they were being asked as a resolution, and then there'll be speakers for and against. So not only do we have it in our package, but during the actual convention itself, it's done and we have our individual voting apparatuses to vote on them.
So would we like to just, do we need to discuss all the items, or we can just follow the recommendations that are in the minutes?
Yeah, Mayor, so typically what we're looking for, if there's any resolutions that would, be a strong benefit to the town to ensure that we vote in favor of them at AUMA, or if there's a resolution that would be harmful to the town, for example, that council can discuss and vote against, if so forth. There's actually, I didn't see anything on here that would, raise flags for me that would be detrimental to our town. There's quite a few that are benefiting. So unless I don't, like I say, there's nothing in here that raises alarm. So council is happy with just accepting this whole package of information and voting at AUMA. That's entirely up to council.
Okay, would we like any discussion on that? So I'm looking for a motion, please.
I'd like to make an motion that we accept the resolution the way it's here and take it to AUMA for voting.
All in favor? And that's carried. 8.2 FCM regarding the support for municipalities facing rising RCMP costs. And I believe we already wrote a letter from our council for that. Is that correct?
Mayor, that's correct. We wrote it to the provincial government expressing our concerns about the rising costs plus the retroactive pay. And we are bringing that up also, I believe, with municipal affairs at AUMA's meeting.
On Thursday.
FCM is just looking for a national type of response on this to the federal government.
Counselor Phillips.
And FCM is just an additional voice. I mean, you have the provincial AUMA, our body from the province. FCM is our federal body. And it's astonishing to me that the federal government could negotiate a contract like this without discussing to the municipalities that have the direct result of paying what they've negotiated. So I am in full support of advocating for the FCM to go and talk to the federal government on this topic.
I agree with that as well. Could we have a motion to, I'm not exactly sure how to word that, but we want to reply to them and tell them that, Yeah.
So Mayor, inside your package, I believe it's the third link down under 8.2. It's a template resolution. That's the resolution that FCM is asking council to pass, authorizing them to lobby the federal government on this issue.
Counselor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we use the FCM template to advocate to the federal government on the provincial or the RCMP costs.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Um, 9.1 correspondence for information. Is there any discussion on any of that? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to accept 9.1 to 9.6 for information. Counselor Fraser,
I so move.
all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Action list. Do we have any questions about the action list? Okay, so I'm sorry, do I need a motion?
Yes, Mayor, just to accept it for information.
Can I have a motion to accept that for information?
I will make a motion to accept the action list as information.
Thank you very much, Counselor Phillips. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Do we have any administrative inquiries? No. Do we have any notices of motion? No. So we are going to go into closed session now, please.
Moment, I'll shut down our live stream.
Sorry, Counselor Fraser.
I will make a motion to go into closed session.
Thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried.